Marquess Evander Thalbourne, the Marquess of Thalbourne, is the most coveted man in England. Impeccable, controlled, irresistible, a gentleman who never loses his composure until he meets her. Lady Seraphina Althea Ravenshire, tempestuous, provocative, the only woman in England capable of making the unflappable Marquess unravel. But there's one problem. She's Lord Tristan's younger sister, Marquess's best friend. A strictly forbidden desire. What happens when the most honorable gentleman of the Regency era falls for the one woman he should never want? When every look is a sin, every word a provocation, and every silence promises a delicious ruin? Prepare for a romance where dangerous tension meets breathtaking banter, where friendship is tested, honor is challenged, and love. Oh, love is a war no one wants to win alone. Oh, and before you dive into this delicious downfall, have you subscribed yet? No? Then do it now, before Marcus finds out you're spying on his life without proper formal authorization, and sends you a 15-page letter on digital propriety and virtual decorum. Trust me, he would. The man is meticulous even when he panics. Big red button below. Click it. Perfect. Now, let the chaos begin. Ashworth Ballroom, Mayfair, London. A May evening, 1814. If there was one thing Marquess Evander Thalbourne, the esteemed Marquess of Thalbourne, mastered flawlessly, it was the art of appearing utterly bored while surveying every detail of a ballroom like a general inspecting a battlefield. And what a battlefield it was. Venetian chandeliers poured golden light over a dazzling crowd draped in silks, plumes, and jewels worth more than small country estates. The orchestra was butchering Haydn with questionable enthusiasm. The suffocating aroma of roses, candle wax, and expensive French perfumes battled for dominance in the air. Marcus adjusted the lace cuffs of his shirt, an automatic gesture when preparing to endure hours of social frivolity, and accepted the champagne. Flute a footman offered on a silver tray. It looks like a cattle market, doesn't it? Came the amused voice of Lord Tristan Leontius Ravenshire, Viscount of Windermere, at his side. Mothers parading their daughters like prize mares at auction. All that's missing are placards reading generous dowry, perfect teeth, proven womb. Marcus suppressed a smile as he turned to his friend. Tristan was the very antithesis of the occasion's demanded sobriety. Crooked cravat, golden brown hair in calculated disarray, and that mischievous gleam in his eyes that always heralded trouble. And you, my dear Tristan, are happily contributing to the spectacle, Marcus replied, raising a brow. I saw at least 3 matrons sigh when you passed by. One nearly fainted. It was touching. Oh, but I have no intention of being tethered anytime soon. Tristan took a long sip of champagne, grimacing. Unlike you, who everyone claims is searching for the perfect bride. Even the Queen mentioned it, you know. Something about finally bringing order to the Thalbourne line. Marcus felt the familiar weight of expectation tighten like an overly snug cravat. The Queen should concern herself with matters of state and leave my marital life in peace. When you're the most eligible bachelor across 3 counties, my friend, you're a matter of state. Before Marcus could retort, a crystalline laugh, genuine, unlike the affected giggles infesting the ballroom, cut through the air like a blade through silk. Marcus turned instinctively, and the world tilted ever so slightly on its axis. Across the room, surrounded by 3 visibly bewitched gentlemen, stood a young woman who seemed made of barely contained fire in human form. Reddish-brown hair caught the chandelier light like molten copper, flowing in loose waves no respectable lady would wear in public. Her eyes, impossible to distinguish their exact color from that distance, but clearly far too expressive for her own good, sparkled with sharp intelligence as she dismantled some poor man's argument. Then she did something extraordinary. She offered the suitor an exaggeratedly formal curtsy that bordered on mockery, turned with a swirl of ivory skirts, and simply dismissed him. The man froze, uncertain whether he had been courted or insulted. Marcus realized with uncomfortable surprise that he was smiling. Who? He began, his voice slightly rough. He cleared his throat. Who is that creature? Tristan followed his gaze and instantly turned to stone. No, pardon? Simply no, Marcus. I merely asked who— My sister, Tristan cut in, his voice low and tense. That creature, as you so eloquently put it, is Lady Seraphina Althea Ravenshire, my younger sister. And before that analytical brain of yours starts making questionable matrimonial calculations, let me be crystal clear. No. Marcus blinked, processing the information. You never mentioned having such a— problematic, stubborn, capable of making a bishop question his faith? I was going to say fascinating, but your description works too. Tristan groaned, running a hand down his face. She spent the last 3 years in Bath with our aunt. Treatments for fragile health, they said. Nonsense. Seraphina has the constitution of a warhorse. Mother simply wanted to keep her away from society until she matured. He made sarcastic air quotes. Obviously it didn't work. Why keep her hidden? Because my sister possesses 2 fatal qualities for a high society lady. A mind too sharp to feign docility, and a tongue that can slice egos from 3 paces away. She's a danger. Tristan eyed his friend suspiciously. Exactly. A danger you, dear Marcus, will admire from a safe distance. No less than 20 yards, preferably from different counties. But Fate, or Seraphina, who apparently had a radar for advantageous situations, had other plans. She crossed the ballroom with purpose, and Marcus noticed 3 things simultaneously. First, her eyes were a tempestuous blue, like the sea before a storm. Second, she moved as if dancing with the wind itself. Natural grace no etiquette mistress could teach. Third, and most unsettling, she was looking directly at him. Tristan, she said, her voice melodious but laced with irony. Don't tell me you're introducing me to your friends who collect bored wives. Thought we'd talked about this. Seraphina behavior, Tristan hissed. She magnificently ignored her brother, turning all her attention to Marcus. He felt the impact of that gaze like a punch to the gut. Lady, Marcus began, extending his hand in automatic courtesy. Seraphina, she replied, briefly resting her gloved fingers on his. Even through the fabric, Marcus felt the warmth. And you must be the famous Marquess of Thalbourne, whom my brother idolizes with near-religious devotion. I must say I expected someone more. Impressive, Tristan choked on his champagne. Marcus, however, felt something unprecedented, the urge to genuinely laugh at a London ball. How peculiar, he answered smoothly, his voice laced with challenge. I expected that Tristan's sister would at least have mastered the basics of courtesy. I see we've mutually disappointed each other. Seraphina's eyes gleamed, not with offense, but with something far more dangerous. Delight. Courtesy is the refuge of the dull Lord Thalbourne. I prefer honesty. Don't you find it refreshing? Refreshing, Marcus echoed, savoring the word. A generous description for what I might call disarming audacity. Disarming to whom, Marquis? She tilted her head, a playful smile curving her lips. Men accustomed to silent agreement and obedient curtsies? How tragic. Tristan glanced between them like a spectator at an especially vicious fencing match. Seraphina. Mother is desperately looking for me to introduce me to the Earl of something dreadfully boring. Yes, I know. She sighed dramatically. But I came here with a mission, to meet the legendary Marquess Thalbourne, the man who supposedly never loses his composure, never utters an improper word, and likely has his morning routine timed to the minute. My brother speaks of you as if you were the second coming of Christ, only with a better-tied cravat. Marcus shot Tristan an accusatory look. His friend seemed ready to evaporate. Your brother exaggerates. Oh, I doubt that, Seraphina countered. Tristan is many things, but a liar he is not. So tell me honestly, Marquis, have you always been this rigidly proper? Or are you making an extra effort to impress tonight? I might ask the same of your impertinence, Marcus retorted, taking a barely perceptible step toward her. Have you always been so delightfully inappropriate, or are you trying especially hard for me? Seraphina's smile widened, dangerous and dazzling. Oh, this is only the beginning, Lord Thalbourne. Then, with a graceful tilt of her head that could have been a curtsy or mockery, Marcus suspected both, she turned and walked away, leaving a trail of disturbance and a subtle hint of jasmine in her wake. Marcus stood frozen, watching her disappear into the sea of silk and feathers. Marcus, Tristan called, his voice tense. Please tell me you're not… Thinking about her? Marcus turned to his friend, expression carefully neutral. Of course not. She's impossible, provocative, entirely inappropriate. Good, because for a moment I thought, fascinating, Marcus murmured to himself. She's absolutely fascinating. Tristan closed his eyes, praying to saints who were clearly not listening. We're doomed. 20 minutes later, Marcus needed air. Not that he would admit it out loud, but the ballroom's temperature suddenly felt unbearable. Or perhaps it was the fifth matron trying to introduce her daughter, listing qualities like obedient, docile, and excellent at embroidery, words that now sounded strangely lifeless. He slipped through the side door leading to the Ashworth's winter gardens. The glass conservatory was an oasis of silence compared to the chaos inside. Exotic orchids hung from suspended pots, perfuming the air with an earthy, subtly sweet fragrance. Fountains murmured in strategic corners. Moonlight cast silver patterns through the glass panels. Marcus inhaled deeply, letting the quiet settle his restless mind. Running away from your own party, Marquis? He froze. Seraphina was leaning against one of the marble columns, half hidden among giant ferns, an open book in her hands. How she had arrived without him noticing was a mystery his analytical mind refused to process. I might ask you the same, Lady Seraphina, he replied, recovering his composure with effort. Though it seems you have a habit of appearing where one least expects. Habit? She closed the book. Marcus noticed it was a volume of Byron's poetry, scandalously inappropriate for an unmarried young lady. I'd call it talent, and for the record, I was here first. You're the one invading my sanctuary. Your sanctuary. Marcus arched a brow, stepping closer. By my calculations, this is the Ashworth's winter garden. Unless you've acquired the property in the past 2 hours. Possession is a matter of perspective, she countered, smiling. I discovered this corner 3 seasons ago, when I was still a rebellious child sneaking away from dance lessons. Therefore, by right of discovery and continued use, I declare myself its emotional owner. Against all logic, a genuine laugh bubbled in Marcus's chest. Right of discovery? This isn't a maritime expedition, Lady Seraphina, isn't it? She moved away from the column, walking among the orchids with the ease of someone who knew every curve of the path. Because I'm fairly certain exploring unknown territory is exactly what we're doing now. The words carried a weight that had nothing to do with gardens. Marcus knew he should retreat. Make a polite comment about the weather, greet her formally, and return to the ballroom. That was what an honorable man, a loyal friend, and a respectable gentleman would do. Instead, he took 3 steps toward her. And what territories would those be exactly? Seraphina stopped and turned to face him. Moonlight streamed through the glass, bathing her face in silver and shadow. Marcus saw, with unsettling clarity, that she was possibly the most beautiful creature he had ever seen. Not because her features were flawless, though they were remarkable, but because of the life that radiated from her. As if every cell of her being refused to accept the monotony of existence. The territories where people speak the truth, Marquis, she replied softly now. Where we don't have to pretend that balls are fascinating, arranged marriages are romantic, or that any of us truly wish to be trapped in that suffocating ballroom. Listening to the same hollow conversations for the 1,000th time, Marcus was silent, processing the raw honesty of her words. He began, searching for the right word. Careful, Marquis, she interrupted, her smile returning. Were you about to call me inappropriate again? Improper? Scandalous? I was going to say disconcertingly refreshing. This time she looked genuinely surprised. For a brief second, the mask of ironic humor slipped, revealing something more vulnerable underneath. Disconcerting, she repeated, testing the word. I'm not sure if that's a compliment or a medical diagnosis. Neither am I, Marcus admitted. But it's the truth. You are disconcerting, Lady Seraphina. You unsettle expectations, conventions, and he hesitated, knowing he was treading dangerous ground, and the equilibrium of foolish men foolish enough to talk with you in a winter garden at midnight. The air between them grew thick, charged with something unnamed. Seraphina stepped toward him. I don't consider you a fool, Marquis. Perhaps you should, and you. She tilted her head, studying him. Do you consider me inappropriate, improper? The kind of woman a sensible man would avoid? Marcus knew the right answer. He knew what he should say to maintain propriety, honor his friendship with Tristan, and protect his sanity. But under that stormy gaze, with the scent of jasmine tangling his senses, Marquess Evander Thalbourne, the man who never lost control, told the truth. I consider you absolutely impossible and completely fascinating. And that, Lady Seraphina, terrifies me. She opened her mouth to respond. Seraphina! Tristan's voice echoed from the corridor. Where the devil are you? Mother's having fits. The spell shattered like broken crystal. Seraphina blinked, stepping back. For a moment, Marcus saw panic flash across her face. Not fear of being discovered, but fear of feeling what she was feeling. I must go, she murmured. Seraphina, good night, Marquess. She slipped past him quickly, avoiding his gaze, and disappeared among the ferns toward her brother's voice. Marcus remained alone in the conservatory, surrounded by orchids and silence, with the unmistakable sense that his carefully ordered life had just begun to unravel. And the most terrifying part? He wasn't sure he wanted to rebuild it. 3 corridors away, Tristan caught his sister emerging from the winter garden, cheeks flushed, eyes far too bright. Where were you? Reading, she answered too quickly. Reading, he repeated, skeptical. In the winter garden alone at midnight. Yes, with Seraphina. Oh, for heaven's sake, Tristan. Stop looking at me as if I've committed a capital crime. She straightened her skirts with more force than necessary. I was just in need of air. Air, he muttered. Of course, air. And it has absolutely nothing to do with a certain Marquess who also conveniently disappeared at the same time. Seraphina froze. I have no idea what you're talking about. I do. Tristan sighed, rubbing his face. Seraphina, Marcus is my best friend. You're my sister. Please, please tell me you're not going to turn this into whatever your chaotic brain is planning. She looked at her brother. And for a moment, Tristan saw the little girl he used to protect from nightmares, who stole sweets from the pantry with him, who cried in his arms when her favorite horse died. I didn't plan anything, Tris, she said softly. I know. Tristan pulled her into a quick hug. Believe me, I know exactly what he is. But this can't happen. You understand that, don't you? Seraphina stepped back, and the mask of sardonic humor slipped back into place like armor. Of course I understand. I'm impossible, inappropriate and utterly unqualified to be considered a suitable wife for the perfect Marquess of Thalbourne. Message received, dear brother. That's not what I— Come on, Mother's probably having apoplexy, she interrupted, already walking back toward the ballroom. I wouldn't want my absence to cause more scandal than my presence already does. Tristan watched her go, a sense of impending disaster churning in his stomach, because he knew that look in her eyes. It was the same look she'd had when she decided to tame an impossible horse or climb a tree everyone said was too dangerous. It was the look of Seraphina Ravenshire deciding that something impossible was absolutely worth attempting, and God help them all. Dawn gilded Rotten Row in Hyde Park as Marcus pushed into a steady gallop, his cadence as precise as a military drill. It had been 5 days since the Ashworth's ball, 5 days of identical mornings, 5 days trying in vain to drive from his mind the memory of a tempestuous young woman. Also 5 days avoiding Tristan, and just as many refusing to admit that, like a fool, he searched for her on every corner of Mayfair. Pathetic. Then he saw her. Seraphina was riding a white mare along the perpendicular path and, good Lord, she was reading while she rode. A book balanced on the reins, posture far too relaxed to be proper, hair loose in the wind like a banner of rebellion. Marcus reined in, staring in disbelief. She looked up, as if she felt the weight of his gaze, and smiled. That dangerous smile. Well now, Lord Thalbourne. She guided the mare toward him with disconcerting ease. I didn't know you enjoyed morning rides. I thought every minute of yours was scheduled 3 weeks in advance. Lady Seraphina, he inclined his head, fighting a smile. Equestrian reading? Is that a new literary genre? Efficiency, Marquis. Why waste time when I can exercise body and mind simultaneously? And if the mare stumbles? Then I shall fall with superior knowledge of Locke's philosophy." She patted the book. "An educated death." Marcus couldn't hold back a laugh. "You are impossible. Second time you've told me that." Seraphina arched a brow. "I'm starting to suspect it's a disguised compliment." "It isn't. Liar." They fell silent, horses moving side by side instinctively. Morning mist danced among the trees, London still drowsy. "You've avoided Tristan all week," she remarked casually. "He's worried, says you never ignore invitations to whites." Marcus felt a wire of tension tighten along his spine and radiate through his muscles. "I've been busy." "With what? Running from me?" He looked at her, startled by the raw honesty. "It would be easier if you didn't appear at every corner I turn." "I could say the same," she murmured. "Except I know exactly where you'll be. Tristan is predictable when he talks about you. Marcus always rides at 6. Marcus always dines at Brooks's on Thursdays. Marcus is probably reorganizing the library by authors, alphabetically, and by year of publication. Chronologically, within the alphabetical, actually." Marcus corrected automatically, then realized the trap. "You're provoking me. Always." Her smile widened. "But I'm also right. You're predictable, Marquis. Meticulous. Controlled. Except..." "Except?" Seraphina slowed to a trot, forcing him to do the same. "Except when you look at me," she said, voice lower. "Then you seem lost." Marcus's heart stumbled. "Seraphina, wager with me," she cut in, changing the subject with disconcerting agility. "To that oak tree. First one there wins." "That's childish. Afraid you'll lose?" Marcus narrowed his eyes. "Never." "Then prove it," and she shot off. He froze for half a second, at her audacity, at her laughter echoing back, at the absurd fact that he was about to race like a schoolboy. Then he spurred his horse. He was an exceptional rider. But Seraphina rode as if she'd been born in the saddle. Fluid movements, perfect harmony with the animal. She glanced back once, saw Marcus closing in, and laughed, pure joy that made his chest tighten. They crossed the line at the oak almost simultaneously. "A tie," she declared, breathless. "I arrived first." "Your eyes betray you, Marquis. It was a tie. My vision is perfect. It's your pride that's oversized." They faced each other, breathing hard, then both smiled. Genuine, without artifice. "You are impossible," Marcus repeated, but this time it sounded like surrender. "And you," Seraphina leaned slightly in the saddle, "are less boring than you look." What a generous compliment. "I have my moments." Marcus knew he should leave. Thank her for the race, take a formal leave, and never again look for her on the corners of Mayfair. Instead, he heard his own voice say, "Tomorrow, same time." Seraphina blinked, surprised. "For another race?" "For whatever you like," he answered, knowing he was being reckless. "As long as it involves you stopping haunting me." "I don't haunt anyone, Marquis. You're the one who insists on seeing me everywhere." "Precisely my problem." She studied his face, something shifting in her expression. "Tomorrow, then," she agreed softly. "But only if you promise one thing." "What?" "Stop avoiding Tristan. He misses you, and he becomes unbearable when he misses someone." She paused. "He can't know about this. About us. Whatever this is." Marcus nodded, throat tight. "Tomorrow, Lady Seraphina. Tomorrow, Marquis." She set off at an easy gallop, leaving him alone with the mist, the dawn, and the growing certainty that he was completely lost. "You're acting strange," Tristan declared, sliding a glass of brandy across the card table at White's that night. Marcus didn't bother to feign ignorance. "Strange how?" "Like someone being chased by a ghost. Or by debt. Or..." Tristan narrowed his eyes. "By a guilty conscience." "My conscience is perfectly clear." "Lie." "You touched your nose." "You always touch your nose when you lie." Marcus lowered his hand, betrayed. "That's ridiculous. I've known you 12 years, Marcus. I know when something's off." Tristan leaned in. "So out with it. Financial, political, existential, romantic," Marcus said before he could stop himself. Tristan froze, glass halfway to his mouth. Romantic, he repeated slowly. You, Marquess Evander Thalbourne, the man who treats marriage like a business negotiation, has romantic trouble. Forget I said anything. Not a chance. Tristan set the glass down with a thump. Who is she? Lady Charlotte? No, too docile. Lady Beatrice, too beatific. Lady, I won't say. Why not? Tristan laughed. Good God, you're blushing. Marquess Thalbourne is blushing. Shut up or I swear I'll… This is marvelous. Tristan was clearly delighted. The Iceman finally melts. I must meet her. Any woman capable of making you lose your composure deserves a monument. If you only knew, Marcus thought miserably. It's complicated. Love always is. It's not love. Marcus corrected far too quickly. It's inconvenient attraction. Ah, even worse, Tristan leaned back, wearing a knowing smile. Inconvenient attraction turns into love before you know it. Believe me, I've seen it happen. That won't happen. Why not? Because she's your sister. Because you'd kill me. Because I'm betraying my best friend's trust every time I look at her, he thought, lacking the courage to say it. Because I'm sensible, Marcus said at last. Tristan studied him for a long moment, amusement giving way to something more serious. You know what your problem is, Marcus. You think being sensible is a virtue. But sometimes being sensible is just a sophisticated form of being a coward. The words hit like a punch. I am not a coward. Then why are you here with me instead of with her? Marcus had no answer to that. 2 weeks later, at Thalbourne Park, Hertfordshire, Marcus should have sensed disaster the moment Tristan suggested an informal country dinner. He also should have been suspicious when his friend casually mentioned that he might bring Seraphina along. After all, she adores your library, but no. Like a hopeful fool, Marcus accepted. And now he was trapped in his own house with the woman who had haunted his every waking thought, and several less innocent ones besides. Dinner was a display of civilized torture. Seraphina sat at his table, the candles casting golden shadows over her face, her melodious voice debating politics with such sharp intelligence that everyone else at the table might as well have been decorative furniture. Marcus barely touched his food, hypnotized by the way she gestured when she made a point, how she bit her lower lip when she was thinking, and the way her eyes gleamed whenever she landed a verbal blow. Tristan, whether oblivious or sadistic, Marcus wasn't sure, monopolized the conversation with talk of agricultural reform. After dinner, while Tristan disappeared to smoke cigars with the other gentlemen, Seraphina simply vanished. Marcus found her 20 minutes later, in his private library, of course. She stood with her back to him, fingertips tracing the spines of his books as if mapping uncharted territory. The faint candlelight created a halo around her loose hair, because naturally she had abandoned her hairpins somewhere along the way. Surveying enemy territory? His voice came out rougher than he intended. Seraphina turned without a hint of guilt, holding a book like a war trophy. Your library reveals more about you than 1,000 balls, Marquis. Philosophy, military strategy, poetry. She pulled another volume from the shelf, raising an eyebrow with that teasing smile that haunted his nights. Byron. I never imagined the impeccable Marquess Thalbourne to indulge in literary scandal. Marcus crossed the space between them in 3 measured steps, taking the book from her hands with a motion that was half reprimand, half excuse to touch her fingers. There are many things you don't imagine about me. The air thickened. Seraphina didn't retreat. She lifted her chin in that defiant way he was beginning to recognize as their own private language, a code only they understood. Then enlighten me, Marquis, she provoked, stepping closer. Or will you keep hiding behind that flawless aristocratic mask? Marcus returned the book to the shelf without breaking her gaze, every fiber of his being urging him to pull her closer, to confess the truths he barely admitted to himself. Instead, the words escaped him as both accusation and plea. And will you keep provoking every man who dares to look at you? Something shifted in her face. The mask of humor slipped for the briefest moment, revealing the vulnerability she hid beneath layers of wit and sharpness. She sighed. the sound carrying the weight of unsaid confessions. "I don't provoke everyone," she replied softly. "Only the ones who are worth the effort." Thunder cracked over the estate, making the windows shudder. Candle flames flickered wildly, casting dancing shadows across their faces. Marcus realized with startling clarity how dangerously close they were. He could see the gold flecks in her stormy eyes, smell the jasmine that clung to her like a forbidden promise. His hand rose of its own accord, fingers tracing the line of her jaw, feeling her shiver beneath his touch. "You're a danger, Seraphina," he whispered hoarsely. "A danger to my sanity, my peace, every damn principle I live by." Her eyes darkened, her lips parting on a breath that matched his. She placed her hand against his chest, feeling the frantic rhythm of his heart through the fine layers of fabric and social restraint. "Then why don't you step away?" Her challenge was barely a whisper, but it carried the full weight of what both of them felt and refused to name. Marcus was inches from breaking, inches from forgetting she was Tristan's sister, from forgetting his duty, his carefully planned future that did not include chaotic passion for an impossible woman. His head tilted, his eyes fixed on her lips, every shred of reason evaporating like mist under a relentless sun. The distance between them dissolved on a shared breath. His lips brushed hers, not quite a kiss but a devastating promise of one. A ghost of a touch, their breaths mingling in that impossible space between desire and restraint. He felt the shiver that ran through her, heard the breathless sigh that escaped her, and it was almost his undoing. Then, like a drowning man clawing at his own salvation, Marcus pulled back abruptly. "I can't. I won't," he stammered, voice strangled. "You don't—" The words died incomplete, but the damage was done. Marcus saw it. The exact moment something flickered in her stormy eyes. A flash of rejection, of misunderstood meaning, raw pain that made his chest tighten. Her lip trembled, just for a heartbeat, before all vulnerability was buried beneath her armor of biting wit. She tried to step closer, hand outstretched as if to undo the unraveling between them, but Marcus flinched away. The movement was instinctive, defensive, and the war on his face, between what he wanted and what he thought he ought to do, must have been obvious because Seraphina froze, her hand suspended between them. "Damn," Marcus muttered under his breath, curses spilling silently. "Damn me. Damn." Seraphina's mask snapped back into place with astonishing speed, sharp irony replacing vulnerability like freshly forged armor. "Oh, I understand perfectly, Marquis," she said, her voice dripping with calculated petulance meant to wound, to create the distance he had forced. How foolish of me. Of course, the impossible Seraphina could never be suitable for the noble Marquess Thalbourne. I must have forgotten my place for a moment. How unforgivable of me to dare. She gestured vaguely between them, sarcasm coating every word. Contaminate your aristocratic perfection with my obvious inadequacy. The insult struck exactly where she intended. Marcus opened his mouth to defend himself, to explain the unexplainable. Seraphina. Tristan's voice carried through the closed door, half a whisper, half exasperated shout. An older brother trying to prevent a social catastrophe. "Seraphina, where are you? Mother's looking for you and Lady Ashworth has started asking questions. If you don't appear in 30 seconds, there'll be enough gossip to ruin your entire season." Marcus recoiled as if burned, the spell shattering into 1,000 jagged shards. Seraphina blinked, disoriented, reality crashing down like cold water. She opened her mouth, he saw the words forming, dying, being reborn, but she only shook her head, taking a step back, then another. "I have to go," she murmured, her voice trembling. "Seraphina, wait!" But she was already turning away, hastily smoothing her crumpled gown, nervous fingers trying to tame hair that had escaped its pins. Marcus watched her slip through the side door that led to the servants' corridor, evading Tristan with the practiced ease of someone well-versed in outmaneuvering a protective brother. He was left alone among the books, the fading scent of candles, his heart still pounding painfully, the bitter taste of almost lingering on his lips. When Tristan finally entered the library minutes later, he found Marcus with his back turned, pretending to examine a volume of epic poetry with feigned interest. "Have you seen Seraphina?" Tristan asked, frustration clear in his voice. "The girl vanished like smoke. "No," Marcus lied and hated how easily it came. "I've been here, alone." Tristan muttered something about impossible sisters and disappeared down the corridor, leaving Marcus alone in the silent library, with distant thunder echoing outside, and the growing certainty that he was losing a battle he'd never had a chance to win. The days that followed were an exercise in refined torture. Marcus threw himself into social obligations with the fervor of a man trying to drown in normalcy, accepting invitations he once refused, and appearing at events he considered a waste of time. The London season was at its peak, which meant an endless procession of balls, dinners, and recitals, each one swarming with hopeful mothers and debutantes, circling him like gulls fighting over crumbs. But in every drawing room, every tedious recital, every empty conversation about weather and embroidery, Marcus found himself searching for copper-burnished hair catching the light of chandeliers, for a crystalline laugh that sounded like imperfect, honest music, for stormy eyes daring him to be more than the mask he wore for society. And then, on a warm June night, came the invitation to a musical soirée at Ravenshire House. Marcus almost declined. He knew it would be reckless, that seeing Seraphina on her own ground, surrounded by family and expectations, would only make everything harder. But Tristan insisted with the suspicious enthusiasm of a man plotting something. And Marcus, weak as he was where any chance of seeing her was concerned, accepted. The Ravenshire home in Mayfair was majestic without being ostentatious, elegant in a way that suggested generations of refined taste, rather than newly minted fortune. The music room on the second floor had walls of emerald green damask and wide windows overlooking an inner garden, where roses opened in aromatic profusion. Gilt chairs fanned out in a semicircle around the grand pianoforte, and London's elite settled in with polite whispers and fluttering fans to stir the heavy air. Marcus arrived fashionably late, slipping into a seat at the back while some young lady massacred Mozart with more enthusiasm than talent. He barely registered the performance. His eyes were already sweeping the room until they found Seraphina near the window, her profile lit by the last rays of the afternoon sun. She wore a blue muslin gown that made her eyes look impossible, her hair arranged in an elaborate style that, Marcus knew from painful experience, she would undo at the first opportunity. She seemed far away, gazing into the garden with an expression he couldn't decipher, and something in his chest ached at the thought that perhaps she was as tormented as he was. When Seraphina's turn came, the room quieted with a different sort of expectation. Her reputation preceded her. Whispers about the eccentric Ravenshire daughter, who had returned from Bath more impossible than before, the one who rejected suitors with irreverence that bordered on insult. She rose with natural grace, walked to the pianoforte without once glancing at the audience, and for a moment simply stood there, fingers hovering over the keys as if in prayer. Then she began to play. Beethoven, Moonlight Sonata, but not in the well-behaved, technically perfect manner young ladies learned from strict governesses. Seraphina played as if she were bleeding through the notes, each chord laden with raw emotion that made the air vibrate. It was wild passion contained by music. It was storm and stillness. It was everything she hid beneath layers of sarcasm and provocation. Marcus felt as if he'd taken a punch to the gut, unable to breathe, to think, to do anything but watch her pour her soul through ivory keys. The room was absolutely silent. Even the gossiping matrons seemed entranced, their fans stilled, eyes wide. But Marcus knew no one else was seeing what he saw. The naked vulnerability on her face, the way she bit her lip at a difficult passage, how she closed her eyes in the most intense moments, lost in an inner world she rarely allowed others to glimpse. When the final note faded, a full 3 seconds passed before anyone applauded. Then the room erupted, ovation crashing over her, but Seraphina barely seemed to hear it. She opened her eyes and her gaze found Marcus across the sea of bodies, and everything else disappeared. For a heartbeat, it was only the two of them. A silent recognition passing between souls who understood one another in a way that defied words. Marcus was on his feet before he thought, pushing through the crowd that swarmed Seraphina with lavish praise. She accepted the compliments with polite smiles, but her eyes never left his, magnetic, Inevitable. It took 15 torturous minutes before he could reach her. Before the guests dispersed in search of champagne and conversation, Seraphina stood by the window when he finally came close enough to speak low. Beyond the reach of curious ears. "You play like you're on fire," he said. Unable to hold the words back, she looked at him, unshed tears glinting in her eyes. "Because I am," she confessed, voice low and intense. "But no one ever notices. They hear the notes, praise the technique, but they don't see. They don't understand that I'm screaming through the music because I can't scream any other way." Marcus didn't think. He didn't calculate consequences or social propriety. He simply reached out and gently took her wrist, feeling the rapid flutter beneath warm skin. An anchor in a rough sea. "I notice," he said, his voice hoarse with restrained emotion. "I notice every damned thing about you, and it's destroying me, Seraphina. Destroying me because I can't have you. I can't even admit what I feel without betraying my best friend, without ruining everything." She went very still, her eyes wide, vulnerable in a way he had never seen. Marcus. His name left her like a prayer, a plea. He released her as if burned, stepping back, throwing up the walls that had been crumbling for weeks. Reality fell between them like a guillotine, sharp and final. "No," he said, more to himself than to her, his voice strangled. "This cannot happen. You are Tristan's sister. I have obligations, responsibilities, there are expectations that—" He dragged a hand over his face as if he could rub out the words he needed to say, but couldn't. "I've spent my life following the path laid out for me. Every step calculated, every decision aligned with what's expected of a Thalbourne. And you—" His voice broke, his eyes revealing a torment words couldn't hold. "You are everything that path never included. Everything I never allowed myself to consider." He didn't need to say more. Seraphina saw it all in his eyes, the pain of a man trapped between who he must be and who he desperately wants to be. She saw the conflict, the invisible barrier he'd spent his life building and now didn't know how to cross. Not because she was unworthy, but because he had imprisoned himself so rigidly he couldn't imagine a life outside those bars. Understanding that hurt even more. Because it wasn't a rejection of her, it was his surrender to fear. Marcus saw the exact moment something broke inside her, not dramatically. Seraphina would never give him that satisfaction. It was subtle. A blink held a fraction too long, a breath drawn too carefully, fingers curling briefly before relaxing with visible effort. When she lifted her face to meet his again, the mask was back, but different, sharper, more dangerous. "Lord Ashford," she called suddenly, looking over Marcus's shoulder with a radiant smile that was entirely false. "What a joy to see you here." Marcus turned, tense, and saw the young Earl of Ashford bounding across the terrace with the eager enthusiasm of a newly praised puppy. The man was in his early 20s, fair hair impeccably combed, and wore the air of someone who'd inherited a title too soon and wasn't quite sure what to do with it. Lady Seraphina. Ashford bowed extravagantly. "Your performance was absolutely celestial. I've never heard Beethoven played with such passion." "Passion," Seraphina repeated, and Marcus heard the venom beneath the honey. "What an interesting choice of word, Lord Ashford. Some would say passion is a flaw in a lady, that we must be restrained, proper, perfectly molded to others' desires and expectations." Ashford blinked, confused. No, of course not. I found it magnificent, refreshing even. You are so different from the others." Different, Seraphina tasted the word like lemon. What a peculiar compliment. Different as in unsuitable, improper, or merely exotic enough to entertain but not to take seriously. Poor Ashford looked utterly lost, glancing between Seraphina and Marcus, as if hoping someone would hand him the rule book for a game he clearly didn't understand. I came to ask if you would honor me with the next dance, Lady Seraphina. There's a waltz beginning in the ballroom and—" "I accept," she cut in, extending her hand with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "It would be positively lovely to dance with someone who appreciates my differences, who recognizes the value in inadequacy." Marcus felt as if he'd been punched again. He saw exactly what she was doing, using Ashford as a shield, as a weapon, as a way to put distance between them that wasn't only physical. "Seraphina," he began, voice low, dangerous. She finally looked straight at him, and what Marcus saw in those stormy eyes made his chest seize. It wasn't anger. Anger he could have managed. It was something worse. Resignation. A wounded acceptance that she had understood the message, that she would bow to the inevitable, that she would learn her place. "Marquess of Thalbourne," she said formally, as if they were polite strangers. "Thank you for your clarifications. They were immensely enlightening. Now, if you'll excuse us, Lord Ashford is waiting for me for the waltz. And I, being the impossible creature that I am, detest making young noblemen wait." She placed her hand on Ashford's arm. He practically glowed with unearned satisfaction and began to walk away. But before crossing the threshold back into the ballroom, Seraphina paused. She didn't turn around. Her eyes stayed fixed ahead, yet her voice carried across the space between them with cutting clarity. "Oh, and Marquis," she said, still without looking, "when you find the perfectly suitable wife you're searching for, the one who fits every expected mold, do make sure to invite me to the wedding. I would love to watch your meticulously planned happiness from a safe distance, where impossible women like me are meant to remain." And then she was gone, leaving Marcus alone on the terrace with the distant sound of the waltz beginning, the scent of night roses that suddenly smelled like a funeral, and the crushing weight of knowing he had just destroyed the only real thing in his perfectly organized life. He braced himself against the stone balustrade, his hands trembling, something that never happened, something that should not happen to a man of his standing. But control, that iron control that defined him, that made him who he was, had shattered the moment he saw resignation in those stormy eyes, where impossible women like me are meant to remain. The words echoed, each one an accusation, each one a truth he had forced upon her with his cowardice disguised as duty. Marcus closed his eyes, inhaling the cool night air, trying to regain a composure that seemed to have fled for good. When he opened them again, through the ballroom's illuminated windows, he saw Seraphina dancing with Ashford. She was smiling, even laughing, saying something that made the young earl blush. To any casual observer, she looked like a young lady simply enjoying the ball. But Marcus knew that smile. He knew it as the weapon she wielded when she needed to hide internal bleeding. And it was in that moment, watching her dance with another man, smiling hollow smiles, performing the version of herself society demanded, that Marquess Evander Thalbourne realized something terrifying. He wasn't merely in love with Seraphina. He loved her in a way that redefined the word. Loved her in a way that rendered his entire life before her. All his plans, expectations, carefully organized duties, utterly meaningless. And he had just thrown her into another man's arms because he was afraid to admit that truth. Idiot, he thought bitterly. A complete coward, she was right. Beneath all the aristocratic perfection, there was only a man too frightened to risk his heart. Marcus pushed himself away from the balustrade, crossing the terrace with steps that tried to be firm but failed miserably. He had to leave before he did something reckless. Before he stormed that waltz, tore Seraphina from Ashford's arms, and confessed everything in the middle of the ballroom like the madman he had apparently become. He found Tristan near the bar, talking with a group of gentlemen about politics or horses or something equally irrelevant. "I have to go," Marcus said without preamble. Tristan turned, and the concern that crossed his face upon seeing his friend's state was immediate. "Marcus, what happened?" "Nothing." The lie slipped out automatically, though weakly. "I just need to go." "Give my apologies to your mother." He didn't wait for a response. He simply left, moving through corridors that seemed to close in around him, descending staircases that multiplied endlessly until he found the fresh night air of London. His carriage was waiting. Marcus stepped inside without looking back, refusing himself one last glimpse of the house, where he had left pieces of himself scattered, like shards of broken glass, where impossible women, like me, are meant to remain. The words followed, him all the way to Thalbourne Park, echoing with every turn of the carriage wheels, with every breath he took, and Marcus knew with devastating certainty that there would be no peace until he fixed this, until he won back what he had thrown away. until he proved to Seraphina that she was not impossible to love, that she was, in fact, the only possible thing to love in a world full of hollow expectations. Marcus didn't sleep that night, nor the next. He lay awake in the darkness of the Marquess's chamber at Thalbourne Park, staring at the canopy above as if the answers were embroidered into the fabric, endlessly replaying the expression on Seraphina's face when he rejected her. The pain in those stormy eyes, barely hidden beneath layers of sharp disdain, haunted him with merciless cruelty. He despised himself. He despised his cowardice disguised as duty, his inability to choose between what he ought to do and what he desperately longed to do. On the third day of self-inflicted torment, Marcus did what any respectable English aristocrat would do when faced with a devastating emotional crisis. He went to the seediest tavern he could find. The Golden Lion stood on the fringes of London, in a district where aristocrats rarely ventured, territory of merchants, sailors, and men who worked with their hands rather than managing estates. The air inside was thick with pipe smoke, the scent of spilled ale, and the honest sweat of men at the end of their day. Marcus, still impeccably dressed though his cravat had been abandoned somewhere along the way, occupied a table in the darkest corner, surrounded by bottles in various stages of emptiness. The barkeep, a broad man with a stained apron and the look of someone who'd seen it all, poured another measure of something that promised to be whiskey but smelled suspiciously like a product of questionable distillation. Marcus downed it in one swallow and instantly regretted it. "If there's anything the devil needed besides bread," he rasped, grimacing, "it was surely the ingredients for this drink." The barkeep gave a rough chuckle. "Matters of the heart, my lord?" he asked, wiping a glass with a rag that was almost certainly dirtier than the glass itself. "Matters of reason," Marcus corrected bitterly, spinning the empty glass between his fingers. "My heart is perfectly damned." The man nodded with the knowing air of one who'd served countless tormented souls. A woman, then. The wrong woman at the wrong time. Being absolutely the right person in every way that matters, Marcus heard himself confess to a complete stranger, the alcohol loosening a tongue he usually kept under rigid control. "And I, being the coward that I am, pushed her away because I don't fit into... because she doesn't..." He stopped, realizing how impossible it was to explain. "Because I'm an idiot." The barkeep poured another drink, this time from a different bottle, something that at least resembled actual whiskey. "On the house," he said. "For lovesick fools. We offer special rates." Marcus almost laughed. Almost. Instead, he drank, feeling the liquid scorch its way down his throat, wishing it could burn away the memory of stormy eyes shining with unshed tears. That was when the tavern door burst open with a crash, letting in a gust of cold wind, and Tristan Ravenshire, in a state that could only be described as restrained fury. "There you are," Tristan declared, striding through the establishment with long steps, oblivious to the curious stares. Marcus raised his glass in mocking salute. "How the devil did you find me?" Tristan pulled up a chair and sat with the weary sigh of a man who'd spent hours in fruitless search. "I looked through every damned club in London. White's, Brooks, even that questionable den you swear you never frequent, but we all know you do." He gestured for the barkeep to bring another glass. "Then I saw your horse tied outside. Recognized that air of equine superiority." Marcus almost smiled. Almost. "My horse doesn't have an air of superiority. It has proper posture." "Of course. And I'm the Prince Regent," Tristan said dryly. Sniffing the drink the barkeep brought him with open suspicion. "Good God, what is this? Distilled poison?" "Probably," Marcus replied, taking another swallow. "It suits my current state." Tristan watched him for a long moment. The tavern was nearly empty at that hour, just a few men scattered at distant tables, the air dense with smoke and low conversations. The dim candlelight cast deep shadows over Marcus's face, and Tristan, with a sudden shock, realized he had never seen his friend like this. Disheveled, cravat undone, eyes carrying a weight that went far beyond physical exhaustion. "How long has it been since you slept?" he asked. "What day is it?" "Thursday." "Then since Monday," Marcus said, turning the glass between his fingers. "Or Tuesday." I've lost track. Marcus. No, the Marquess interrupted. Don't ask. I don't want to talk about it. Tristan fell silent, sipping the questionable liquid and wincing. They sat like that for several minutes. Two friends sharing a silence that was both uncomfortable and strangely comforting. Tristan had known Marcus long enough to recognize when to push and when to simply be there. But then, because he couldn't help himself, the words slipped out. Seraphina's acting strange. Marcus froze. Not visibly. He still had enough control for that, but Tristan saw it. He saw the almost imperceptible tightening of fingers around the glass, the line that formed between Marcus's brows, the way his jaw clenched. Strange how. Marcus's voice came out far too casual. Quiet, Tristan replied, watching his friend closely. She's never quiet. She's not playing the pianoforte, not reading those scandalous novels, not provoking anyone. It's as if he searched for the right words, as if someone extinguished the fire, and only the smoke remains. Marcus didn't answer, but his eyes closed briefly, as if the words caused physical pain. Tristan began connecting the dots. His friend's disappearances, Seraphina's change, the odd tension during the musical soiree, the fact that Marcus was drowning himself in cheap alcohol in a fifth-rate tavern. She's decided to return to Bath. Tristan went on, his voice softer now. To her aunt's house? She said she's grown tired of London, that the season is, he made air quotes, too dull for her tastes. He noticed the way Marcus opened his eyes then, and there was something devastating in that look. Relief mingled with pain, hope smothered by resignation. Perhaps it's for the best, Marcus murmured, more to himself than to Tristan. The best? Tristan arched a brow. For whom? For everyone. Oh yes, she's clearly thriving. And you? Tristan gestured toward his disheveled friend. Drinking poison in a questionable establishment at 2 a.m. You are the very picture of happiness. Marcus let out a humorless laugh. Go to hell, Tristan. I'm already there. You dragged me into this charming establishment, he said, knocking on the sticky table in disgust. I'm fairly certain I've contracted at least 3 diseases just by sitting here. Despite everything, Marcus felt the corners of his mouth twitch upwards slightly. No one asked you to come. Of course you didn't, but I'm your best friend. It's practically my contractual duty to save you from yourself. Tristan leaned back in his chair, studying him. So, are you going to tell me what happened, or do I have to guess? Because my deductive skills are becoming alarmingly accurate, and you won't like my conclusions. There's nothing to tell. Liar, Tristan said without malice. You touched your nose. And you know you do that when you're not telling the truth. It's a pathetic tic. Marcus lowered the hand that had traitorously started to rise toward his nose. I hate you. I love you too, darling, Tristan replied with dry sarcasm. You know what's funny? These past few weeks I've seen you more alive than I have in years. Irritated, confused, completely out of your usual control. But alive. And now, he gestured toward Marcus's current state, you've gone back to being the dead version of yourself. Only worse, because now you know exactly what you're losing. The words hit with surgical precision. Marcus closed his eyes, resting his forehead in his hands. She deserves more, he finally said, his voice muffled. She deserves someone who isn't afraid, who doesn't care what the world thinks. Who can offer her freedom? And you think she's going to find that in Bath? Tristan asked, his voice beginning to carry something beyond mere concern. Hidden away in her aunt's house, pretending to be some domesticated version of herself so she won't bother anyone. Marcus lifted his head, his eyes burning. What do you expect me to do, Tristan? Show up at Ravenshire's door and declare, what exactly? That I've lost my mind over your sister? That I can't sleep because her smile haunts me? That I can't resist that infuriating defiance? That every damned breath hurts because she's not here? The silence that followed was absolute. Tristan went completely still, processing the words. Marcus saw the exact moment realization struck. The slight widening of his friend's eyes, the tightening of his jaw, something between shock and betrayal crossing his face. Wait, Tristan said slowly, his voice dangerously controlled. You're in love with Seraphina. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. Marcus didn't deny it. He didn't confirm it either. He simply looked at his friend with the expression of a man who'd just confessed to a capital crime. "With my sister," Tristan repeated, as if he needed to hear the words aloud to believe them. "You fell in love with my sister, Seraphina, my younger sister." "Tristan, no." Tristan stood abruptly, the chair scraping. "No. Of all the women in London, in all of bloody England, you had to." He ran his hands over his face, taking a deep breath. "I warned you. Damn it, Marcus, I warned you to stay away from her." "You think I chose this?" Marcus shot back, standing as well, frustration breaking through. "You think I wanted to fall in love with her?" "So it's true," Tristan let out a humorless laugh. "My best friend. My sister. Perfect." "Tristan, please." "She leaves tomorrow," Tristan cut in, his voice cold now. "Early in the morning. For Bath." He tossed some coins onto the table with more force than necessary. "And you know what? Maybe that's for the best. Far away from you. Far away from this mess." "You don't understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly," Tristan said, turning toward the door. He paused, looking back with an expression that mixed disappointment and something close to restrained anger. "You're my best friend, and she's my sister. And now I have to deal with the fact that you two, He shook his head, unable to finish the sentence. "I need air. And distance. Preferably in a different county from you." The door slammed behind him, the sound echoing through the nearly empty tavern. Marcus slumped back into his chair, staring at the empty glass. "Wonderful," he muttered to no one but himself, his voice heavy with bitterness. "Now I've lost my friend too." The barkeep approached, glancing between the door and Marcus. "Another drink, my lord." Marcus slid the glass across the counter. "Bring the bottle." Thalbourne Park, Hertfordshire, 3 weeks later. The stack of documents on Marcus's desk seemed to multiply of its own accord. Lease agreements awaiting signatures, letters from estate stewards in Yorkshire, social invitations that required replies, all waited for the attention of the Marquess of Thalbourne, who sat in his leather chair holding the same letter for 20 minutes without reading a single word. The private library was far too quiet. Or perhaps Marcus had become too sensitive to silence, to that oppressive absence of irreverent laughter, of sharp remarks about his choice of books, of the jasmine scent that used to announce her presence before he even saw her. He placed the letter back on the pile for the 10th time, picked up his quill with renewed determination, dipped the tip into the inkwell, brought it to the paper, and then stared at the blank space as though words had been banished from the English language. Pathetic, he thought bitterly. 3 weeks since Seraphina had left for Bath. 3 weeks since Tristan had walked out of that tavern and hadn't spoken to him except through cold, perfunctory notes about business matters. 3 weeks of Marcus trying to convince himself that he had made the right choice. The sensible choice, the choice that protected everyone. 3 weeks of sheer misery. The door opened without warning, something that had happened with alarming frequency in this house ever since Seraphina had stormed into his life and shattered basic concepts of privacy. But it was only Whitmore, his butler, carrying a silver tray with tea Marcus hadn't requested. "I thought your lordship might be in need of some refreshment," the old servant said in a tone that suggested refreshment was code for intervention out of concern for my masters. Sanity. Marcus accepted the cup without argument. Whitmore had served the Thalbourne family for 40 years and had earned the right to express his opinions through subtle gestures and unsolicited tea. "Thank you, Whitmore." The butler hesitated, looking at the untouched pile of documents, then at his master's face, which probably bore the visible signs of sleepless nights and miserable days. "If I may be so bold, my lord," he began cautiously. "You may not," Marcus cut in, though without real venom. "A walk in the gardens might do your lordship some good. The afternoon air is particularly pleasant. The gardens where I walked with her, where she mocked my roses for being excessively organized, where I nearly kissed her by the fountain before reason stopped me. I'm busy. Whitmore." The silence that followed carried the weight of 40 years of service and zero patience for aristocratic foolishness. "As you wish, my lord," Whitmore finally said, withdrawing with the dignified disapproval of a man who had raised 3 generations of Thalbournes and wasn't impressed by any of them. Marcus turned his gaze back to the documents, determined to at least sign something, anything, to justify the hours he spent locked in that room pretending to function as a productive human being. The quill scratched across the paper, Marquess Evander Thalbourne. He stopped, staring at the incomplete signature, and without warning, memory hit him like a crashing tide. Seraphina laughing at his formality, imitating his signature with exaggerated flourishes, teasing that he signed as if he were drafting a peace treaty rather than confirming attendance at a tea. The quill slipped from his hand. Marcus leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes against the sharp ache in his chest that had come in relentless waves for the past 3 weeks, leaving him exhausted and defeated. "She's better off without you," he repeated like a mantra. "She's free. She can be who she truly is, without your limitations, your fears, your cowardice." But the words rang hollow even inside his own head. Bath, Somerset. That same afternoon, Seraphina watched the soft rain tapping against the drawing room windows of Aunt Cordelia's house, an open book resting in her lap that she couldn't bring herself to read. Bath was charming at this time of year, with its steaming thermal waters and elegant architecture, but it all seemed pale compared to the chaotic vitality of London. Or perhaps it was simply she who had grown pale, drained of the colors that used to define her. Aunt Cordelia snored softly in the armchair by the fireplace, embroidery forgotten in her lap. It was a scene of domestic tranquility that should have brought peace. Instead, Seraphina felt as if she were slowly suffocating. 3 weeks trying to recover her joy, her irreverence, that spark that had made her both impossible and fascinating. 3 weeks forcing laughter that even to her own ears sounded false, delivering witty remarks that lacked their usual sting, playing the pianoforte with flawless technique but no passion. 3 weeks pretending she didn't miss him with every breath. The sound of a carriage arriving made her lift her head. Familiar voices in the vestibule. Her mother, her father, Tristan. The family had come to visit her, as they did weekly since she had voluntarily exiled herself in Bath. Seraphina composed her face, raising the mask she had been perfecting, and rose to greet them. Her mother entered first, elegant as ever in a moss-green traveling gown, followed by her father, a stern man of few words, and Tristan, who observed her with a piercing look that made her want to hide. "Seraphina, darling." Lady Ravenshire kissed both her daughter's cheeks. "You look—" She hesitated, clearly searching for a compliment that wouldn't sound false. "Rested." Code for lifeless, Seraphina translated mentally. "Bath has that effect, Mama. It's soporific in the most civilized way." Tristan snorted but said nothing. He had been avoiding deep conversations with her since her arrival, and Seraphina suspected why. There was something unspoken between them, something tied to a certain marquis she refused to mention, and he refused to explain. "We have news," the Earl of Ravenshire announced, taking the armchair Aunt Cordelia vacated as she woke up at the sound of the visitors. Seraphina's stomach tightened. In the Ravenshire household, news announced in that tone was rarely good. "The Earl of Ashford," her mother began with a hopeful smile, "has made a formal proposal. He's quite taken with you, dear. He found your performance at the musicale celestial, in his words, and he's recently widowed with no heirs, so—" Seraphina burst out laughing. It wasn't the delicate, polite laughter expected of a young lady. It was genuine, verging on hysterical, the kind of laughter that made everyone in the room look at her with growing concern. "Ashford?" She managed between giggles. "The poor confused boy who could barely form a coherent sentence? The one who called me different, as if it were some exotic illness." "Seraphina, manners," her mother reprimanded, though there was uncertainty in her voice. "No, Mama, just no." Seraphina wiped tears of laughter from her eyes, still smiling but now with something sharp and desperate beneath the expression. "Ashford is adorable in the way dogs are adorable. Loyal, enthusiastic, completely lost. And I refuse. You don't even know him well enough to reject him outright," her father interjected. "Firm. I know enough to realize I'd spend the rest of my life explaining my own jokes to him." Seraphina Althea Ravenshire, Lady Ravenshire rose, exasperation cracking her composure. You need to grow up. You need to understand that the world does not bend to your whims. Ashford is an excellent match, kind, wealthy, of a respectable family. If you keep refusing every suitor who appears, your time will pass. You'll be left alone, forgotten, with no husband, no family of your own. Then I'll be alone, Seraphina interrupted, the coldness in her own voice surprising her. I don't need to marry, Mama, especially not to men who see me as an amusing curiosity, but don't understand me, who admire my difference but would expect me to suppress it the moment the marriage contract is signed. Tristan, who had remained silent until then, watched his sister with an unsettling intensity. Her mother opened her mouth to argue, but her father raised a hand, silencing her. So you've decided, he said, not a question, yes, and no argument will change your mind, none, the Earl sighed, exchanging a meaningful look with his wife. Very well, we won't force you, but understand, Seraphina, opportunities like this don't come often, especially not for young women with a reputation for being difficult, impossible, unsuitable. The words echoed, each one a scar she carried. I understand perfectly. Papa, the silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the crackle of the fire and the steady patter of rain against the windows. Tristan was still watching her, and Seraphina suddenly realized, with startling clarity, that he could see through the mask. He saw the pain she hid behind forced laughter and witty rejections. He saw that her heart was unavailable to Ashford or anyone else because it already belonged to someone, to his damned best friend, to the man Tristan likely believed he ought to hate now, for daring to fall in love with his sister after being warned not to. Lady Ravenshire broke the silence with a dramatic sigh. Well, at least the hunting season will distract you from these ideas. We're going to Ravenshollow Hall next week. The country air will do you good, dear, and who knows, with a fresh perspective. I won't change my mind about Ashford, Mama. We'll see. The Earl stood, adjusting his coat. The estate is prepared. We leave Monday at dawn, and Seraphina, he looked at his daughter with something close to tenderness, be kinder to yourself. Whatever it is you're carrying, you don't have to carry it alone. He left, followed by his wife, who was still muttering about wasted opportunities and stubborn daughters. Tristan stayed behind, watching his sister for a long moment. He's miserable too, he finally said, voice low. If that's any comfort, Seraphina froze. I don't know what you're— Don't lie to me, Sarah, I'm your brother. I've known you since the day you were born, he said, stepping closer and placing a hand on her shoulder. And I've known Marcus long enough to recognize a man in love suffering from his own stupidity. Tears burned in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. It doesn't matter. He made it clear that I don't fit. He's an idiot, Tristan said simply, but an idiot in love. And that counts for something. She stared at him, stunned. I thought you were furious. With him, with this. I am, Tristan admitted. Furious that my best friend fell in love with my sister and didn't tell me. Furious that both of you are miserable out of pride and fear. Furious that I'm stuck in the middle of it, he sighed. But mostly furious because I know the two of you could be happy. If you'd just stop sabotaging yourselves. Seraphina didn't know what to say. Tristan's reluctant approval was the last thing she'd expected. He turned to leave but paused in the doorway, looking back with a thoughtful expression. Ravenshollow Hall. Hunting season. We always invite close family friends to join, Seraphina frowned. And the smile that spread across Tristan's face was pure mischief. And I've just had an idea. Ravenshollow Hall, Northumberland. Monday morning. Marcus should have suspected the moment he received Tristan's invitation. 3 weeks of frigid silence, and then, suddenly, a cordial note inviting him to the annual hunting season at Ravenshollow Hall. As if nothing had happened. As if there hadn't been tension, devastating confessions in dingy taverns, or impossible sisters imprisoning the hearts of foolish marquises. But Marcus, desperate for any sign that their friendship might be repaired, accepted. And now here he was, standing in the entrance hall of the Ravenshire estate, watching Tristan descend the staircase with a smile that could only be described as dangerously amused. "Marcus." Tristan greeted him with suspicious enthusiasm. "I'm so glad you accepted. We've got an excellent group this year. Lord Pembroke, the Ashworth brothers, and, well, a few surprises." "Surprises," Marcus repeated, immediate suspicion sharpening his tone. "Good surprises, probably. Depends on one's perspective." "Really?" Before Marcus could question further, the Countess of Ravenshire's voice echoed down the corridor. "Tristan, dear, make sure the Marquess's room is—" She stopped upon seeing Marcus, her polite smile tinged with a hint of tension. "Lord Thalbourne, welcome to Ravenshollow Hall." "Lady Ravenshire." Marcus bowed impeccably. "Thank you for your hospitality." She nodded, but there was something in her gaze, an assessing glimmer, perhaps curiosity, that made him uneasy. As if she knew something he didn't. "Everyone in this family seems to know something I don't," he thought irritably. "Dinner will be at 8, she announced. "Please make yourself at home." "Tristan, show the Marquess to his rooms." With a rustle of skirts, she departed, leaving the two men alone. Marcus turned to Tristan with an accusatory look. "What are you plotting?" "Me?" Tristan placed a hand on his chest in a gesture of mock innocence. "I'm simply offering hospitality to an old friend. One who coincidentally fell in love with my sister, and then emotionally wrecked her. But water under the bridge, yes? Tristan, your rooms are in the east wing." Tristan cut him off, already climbing the stairs. "Magnificent view of the gardens. And the lake. And coincidentally, the tower where my sister used to spend hours reading when she was younger. But I'm sure that's irrelevant." Marcus stopped halfway up the stairs. "Seraphina is here?" Tristan glanced back, his smile far too innocent. "Oh, did I forget to mention?" "My mistake. Yes, the entire family is here, including my sister, who, I should warn you, has no idea you're coming. So her reaction at dinner will be, 'Tristan, you set me up.'" "Set up is such a negative term," Tristan said, continuing upward. "I prefer strategic intervention, or a forced opportunity for redemption, or simply I'm tired of watching you both be miserable and stupid." Marcus followed, his mind spinning. "She's going to hate me." "Probably," Tristan agreed cheerfully. "Or she'll throw something at you, or both. Should be fun to watch. Why are you doing this?" Tristan paused at the doorway of one of the guest rooms, turning to face his friend. The amusement on his face gave way to something more serious. "Because you two are the most stubborn, idiotic people I know. And because even though I'm furious with both of you, I can't stand watching you like this. Broken." He opened the door. "So fix it. Tonight, preferably. Before I regret helping." Marcus stepped into the luxurious room, still processing. "And if she doesn't want to hear me out? Then you'll have to get creative," Tristan said, clapping him on the shoulder. "Luckily, I've seen you plan military campaigns and complex political negotiations. Winning back a woman should be easy in comparison. She's not a woman, she's Seraphina." "Exactly my point," Tristan grinned. "Dress properly for dinner. And Marcus, try not to ruin it again. My patience has limits." Seraphina descended for dinner at 8 with the resignation of someone facing a tedious social obligation. The hunting season always attracted the usual crowd of gentlemen. Tristan's friends, her father's acquaintances, all more interested in showing off their skills with firearms than engaging in intelligent conversation. She wore a blue satin gown her mother insisted was appropriate, but not excessively festive, and her hair was arranged in an elaborate coiffure that was already starting to irritate her. But she held herself with perfect posture, polite mask firmly in place, ready for hours of refined boredom. Then she entered the drawing room and saw him, Marquess Evander Thalbourne, impeccably dressed for dinner, standing near the fireplace speaking with her father. The world tilted violently on its axis. The air rushed from her lungs. Every nerve ending in her body flared awake in alarm. "No, no, no, no." He turned as if sensing the weight of her gaze, and their eyes met across the room. For a moment, just a moment, Seraphina saw everything in his face. Surprise, longing, pain, desperate hope. Then she lifted her chin, restored her mask, and crossed the room as if he were merely an unremarkable piece of furniture. "Mama," she said. her voice miraculously steady. "What a varied gathering we have tonight." Lady Ravenshire looked vaguely guilty. "Yes, well, Tristan invited a few additional friends. I can see that." Seraphina snatched a glass of wine from a passing footman's tray and took a generous sip. How unexpected. Tristan appeared beside her, looking both guilty and amused. "Sarah, dearest sister, I'm sure you remember the Marquess of Thalbourne. An old family friend." She gave him a look that promised painful retribution. "But of course, how could I forget?" She turned to Marcus with a smile both courteous and lethal. "Lord Thalbourne, what an absolutely unexpected surprise to find you here." Marcus took a step toward her. "Lady Seraphina, you look—" He searched for the right words. "Radiant, and you look predictable," she shot back. "Is radiant really the best you can do? I expected greater creativity from a man of your education." Tristan stifled a laugh. Other guests were beginning to notice the tension, curious eyes turning toward the trio. "Perhaps we could talk," Marcus tried. "In private." "How peculiar," Seraphina tilted her head. "I thought we'd exhausted every possible conversation, especially the part about how I don't fit into expected molds. Or was it, don't follow the prescribed path? I lose count of your eloquent rejections." Pain flashed across Marcus's face. "Seraphina, please." "Dinner is served." The butler's voice saved Marcus from a devastating reply. Seraphina turned and walked toward the dining room with regal posture. Marcus remained frozen, watching her leave. Tristan patted his shoulder. "Told you it'd be interesting," he murmured. And look on the bright side, she didn't throw anything. Yet. Dinner was a refined form of torture. Seraphina was seated, by a cruel seating arrangement that was obviously Tristan's doing, directly across from Marcus. Every time he looked up, he met her gaze. Every time he tried to start a conversation, she cut him off with a sharp remark aimed at another guest. Between the second and third course, Lord Pembroke, an older gentleman renowned for his complete lack of social tact, decided to contribute. "Lady Seraphina, I heard you refused the young Earl of Ashford's proposal. Surprising. The man seems a good match." The silence that followed was absolute. Seraphina delicately set her fork down on the plate. "Lord Pembroke, with all due respect, my matrimonial life, or lack thereof, is not a topic for discussion over asparagus soup. But surely you must consider—" "What I must consider," she interrupted, her voice still polite but edged with steel, "is that marrying simply for the sake of marrying, to a man who finds me interesting, but does not understand me, would be wasting a life in a polite lie. I'd rather die single and happy than married and hollow." Marcus choked on his wine. Seraphina looked directly at him. "Is there a problem, Lord Thalbourne?" "None," he replied, wiping his mouth. "I simply admire your conviction." "Conviction," she repeated, a dangerous smile curving her lips. What an interesting word to choose. Some would call it stubbornness, or persistent inadequacy, or a refusal to accept the place society has assigned. "I'd call it courage," Marcus said, his voice low but firm. "Courage that many of us lack." Her eyes widened briefly before the mask returned. "Courage or stupidity? The difference is perspective." She rose, though dinner was not yet over. "If you'll excuse me, the journey was tiring. Good night, everyone." She left, the room falling into awkward silence. Lady Ravenshire sighed. "That girl, she's got spirit," the Earl added, something like pride in his voice. "Always has." Marcus rose as well. "Forgive me. I need some air." He left before anyone could object, following the path Seraphina had taken. Tristan watched it all with satisfaction, turning back to his soup. "Anyone want to wager how long until the dramatic confession?" Marcus found Seraphina on the terrace overlooking the gardens, leaning against the stone balustrade, gazing at the star-dusted night sky. She didn't turn when she heard footsteps, but he saw her shoulders tense. "I came out here to escape you," she said without looking. "I know. And yet, here you are." Yes, she finally turned, and the anger in her eyes was preferable to the indifference he'd feared. "What do you want, Marcus? More painful truths about how I'm impossible? More explanations about duties and expectations? Or did you simply come to remind me of what I can't have?" He took a step toward her. "I came to ask for forgiveness. Seraphina laughed, but the sound held no humor. Forgiveness. How convenient. And does that change anything? Does it make your words hurt less? Erase 3 weeks of misery? No, he admitted. It doesn't change anything, but it still needs to be said. Then say it. She crossed her arms defensively. Say your polite apology and go back inside. Back to your perfect life where I don't exist. My life isn't perfect, Marcus burst out, frustration breaking through. It's ruined completely since you left. I left? Seraphina stepped closer, jabbing his chest with her finger. You pushed me away. You said I didn't fit, that I was everything you shouldn't want. Because I'm afraid, he shouted back. Afraid of hurting you, of trapping you, of destroying everything that makes you who you are. Then give me a choice, she shouted too. Stop deciding what's best for me and give me the damn choice. They were inches apart now, breathing heavily, years of restraint and weeks of pain exploding between them. You want a choice? Marcus cupped her face, forcing her to look at him. Then choose. Choose whether you want an imperfect man who will frustrate you with his need for order, who will fight against his own nature just to try to deserve you, who loves you so desperately he can barely function without you. Seraphina froze, her eyes wide. What did you say? I said I love you, he repeated, his voice rough. I love your impossibility, your refusal to bow, every sharp comment that makes me question everything. I love how you read while riding, how you play Beethoven as if bleeding through the notes, how you look at me as if you see beyond the mask. I even love it when you make me want to tear my hair out in frustration. Tears streamed down her cheeks. You broke me, she whispered. You made me believe I wasn't enough. And I spent 3 weeks wanting to die because of it. He pressed his forehead against hers. You're not just enough, Seraphina. You're everything. You're the only thing that makes sense in a world of empty conventions. But you said, I know what I said. And I was wrong, terrified and wrong. He pulled her closer. Because you're right. A life following rules without joy, without irreverence, without you, is unbearably dull. It's existing instead of living. He looked at her, eyes deep and full of passion. Seraphina Althea Ravenshire, you stormed into my life like a hurricane, shattered my peace, ruined my plans, and stole every piece of my heart. Marry me so I can spend the rest of my life being delightfully tormented by you. She sobbed, clinging to him. Yes, I will. But only because I love you too, she confessed against his chest. I hate you for making me love you, but I love you. Even when you're impossible and stubborn and obsessively organized. He laughed through his own tears. I'll need you to repeat the love part. Without the insults, if possible. Seraphina lifted her face, and the smile that crossed through her tears was genuine. Don't even dream of it. The insults are part of the package. Then I accept the entire package, he said, serious once more. If you'll accept me, with all my flaws, fears, and unhealthy obsession with schedules. We've already established it's unhealthy. Seraphina. Yes, she interrupted. Yes, I accept you. Your flaws, fears, schedules, and everything else. Marcus didn't wait any longer. He kissed her with all the hunger of 3 weeks, all the pain, all the desperate need. And Seraphina kissed him back with equal fervor, her hands tangling in his hair, her body pressed to his as if trying to make up for every lost second. When they finally parted, both were breathless. We need to talk to Tristan, Marcus murmured against her lips. And your parents and… Tomorrow, Seraphina silenced him with another kiss. For now, come with me. She took his hand, leading him through the gardens toward the line of trees. Where are we going? The hunting cabin, she explained with a mischievous smile. Old, abandoned, but private. Very private. We need to talk away from curious ears. Marcus allowed himself to be led, their hands intertwined as they crossed moonlit gardens until they reached a small stone structure hidden among centuries-old oaks. The cabin was exactly as she'd described. Old, dusty, but private. Moonlight streamed through grimy windows, casting silvery shadows over furniture draped in white sheets. Marcus closed the door behind them, and suddenly he was nervous in a way he never was at elegant balls or political negotiations. Seraphina. She turned, looking at him with a mix of vulnerability and determination. You talk too much, she said softly, and think too much. But this time I need you to think. Think about what you're asking. Think if you truly want to spend the rest of your life with a woman who will challenge every decision, mess up every schedule, question every rule. Marcus stepped closer, cupping her face tenderly. I've thought about it. For 3 miserable weeks, I thought, and the only conclusion I reached is that a life without you isn't worth living perfectly. He pressed his forehead against hers. Marry me, Seraphina. Not because it's convenient or suitable, but because I love you in a way that both terrifies and frees me. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you, but under one condition. Anything. Promise you'll never push me away out of fear again. If we're doing this, we do it together. With every scandal, every difficulty, every impossibility. I promise, he kissed her softly. Together. Always together. They remained like that, embraced under the moonlight, sealing promises with chaste but future-filled kisses. When they finally returned to the estate in the early hours of the morning, they carried plans, dreams, and an unspoken agreement to face any storm together. The next morning, Marcus woke to insistent knocking at the door. Sunlight flooded the room, and a glance at the clock revealed it was nearly 9, scandalously late by his standards. Tristan entered without waiting for permission, an irritatingly cheerful smile on his face. Good morning, Sleeping Beauty. Sleep well? Pleasant dreams? Marcus threw a pillow at him. Go to hell, Tristan. Already did. Came back to get you. He flopped into the armchair. The hunt starts in an hour. And we have interesting developments. What kind of developments? The kind where my mother, in her infinite wisdom, invited the Earl of Ashford to join the season. He arrived an hour ago, bringing flowers for Seraphina and poetry he wrote himself. It's painfully bad. Marcus sat up abruptly. Ashford is here? Very here. Very smitten, very oblivious to the fact that my sister would rather be eaten by wolves than marry him. Tristan examined his nails. It's going to be fun. For me, at least. Marcus got up, searching for clothes. I need to speak to your father. About formally asking for Seraphina's hand. Today. Tristan grinned. Finally. I thought you'd never ask. Father's in his study. But I'd hurry. Ashford mentioned something about formal declarations over lunch. Marcus dressed in record time. Seraphina entered the drawing room and immediately wanted to turn back. Ashford was there with the other guests, and his eyes lit up upon seeing her in a way that could only be described as devotional and slightly unsettling. Lady Seraphina. He rose so fast he nearly toppled his chair. What a celestial vision on this radiant morning. Lord Ashford, she replied, forcing politeness. What? Surprised to see you here. Your distinguished mother was kind enough to invite me. He approached, holding a bunch of pink roses. I brought these humble flowers as a tribute to your incomparable beauty. Seraphina looked at the flowers, as if they were venomous snakes. How thoughtful. Marcus entered at that moment, and the tension in the drawing room visibly heightened. His eyes met Seraphina's, and something passed between them. Promise, possession, a silent vow to rescue her from that torment. Marquess of Thalbourne, Ashford greeted cheerfully. What a joy to see you. I was just telling Lady Seraphina about the poem I composed in her honor. Would you like to hear it? No. Marcus and Seraphina answered in unison. Ashford blinked, confused. But it's about lilies and the brightness of your eyes compared to the stars, and my eyes don't look like stars, Seraphina interrupted. They look like eyes, human, functional. Lady Ravenshire coughed, clearly trying to save the situation. Seraphina, dear, Lord Ashford has traveled a long way. Then I suggest he go back. The journey seems to have exhausted his poetic creativity. Marcus stifled a laugh behind his teacup, but gave Seraphina a measured look, as if silently urging her not to push the poor Earl too far. Ashford, blessed with an impressive lack of emotional sensitivity, pressed on. In fact, I hope to have the opportunity to speak with you privately today, Lady Seraphina. There is a matter of importance I wish to discuss. She'll be busy, Marcus cut in, his voice low but firm. Pardon? Lady Seraphina will be busy all day. With me. The silence that followed was absolute. Lady Ravenshire dropped her fork. The Earl of Ravenshire raised his eyebrows. Tristan smiled like a cat that had just caught an especially satisfying mouse. Ashford looked between the two of them, processing slowly. I don't understand. Understand this, Seraphina said, turning to Marcus with a radiant smile. Lord Thalbourne and I have matters to discuss. Matters that do not involve bad poetry or comparisons to lilies. Or stars, Marcus added. Definitely not stars. Ashford flushed crimson. But your intentions. This is improper. Improper, Seraphina repeated, savoring the word. How interesting, coming from a man who showed up without a formal invitation from me and assumed cheap flowers would buy my affection. Seraphina? Lady Ravenshire exclaimed, horrified. Mother, with all due respect, if you intend to push me into a convenient marriage, at least pick a suitor who knows the difference between courtship and poetic harassment. Marcus had to bite the inside of his cheek to keep from laughing. The Earl of Ravenshire rose. I believe we could all use some fresh air. The hunt awaits. Lord Ashford, perhaps you'd like to prepare? Ashford left, clearly confused, embarrassed, and wounded, mumbling something about female ingratitude. When the door closed, Lady Ravenshire turned to her daughter. That was unnecessarily cruel. That is not the upbringing I gave you. It was necessarily honest, Seraphina corrected. He traveled all this way expecting me to fall at his feet over a bouquet of flowers. He deserved to know the truth. And what truth would that be? Her father asked, though amusement flickered in his eyes. Seraphina looked at Marcus. That my heart is already spoken for. Marcus stepped toward her, but the Earl raised his hand. Marquess of Thalbourne, my study, now. Marcus nodded, following the Earl out of the room, but not before exchanging a look with Seraphina that promised everything would be all right. Tristan leaned back in his chair, grinning. Well, he said to no one in particular, this is getting interesting. Marcus entered the dark wood-paneled study, where the Earl of Ravenshire sat behind the imposing desk. The older man studied the Marquess with an unreadable expression, fingers intertwined on the table. Sit down, Lord Thalbourne. Marcus obeyed, maintaining impeccable posture despite the nervousness twisting inside him. He had considered asking for the hands of heiresses before, cold, calculated transactions. But this was different. This mattered in a way that made his palms sweat inside his gloves. I presume I know why you're here, the Earl began. I've come to ask permission to court Lady Seraphina, and with your blessing to marry her. The Earl leaned back, observing him for a long moment. My daughter is not an easy woman, Marquis. She's stubborn, defiant, and possesses a tongue sharp enough to cut egos from 3 paces, as you've surely noticed. We've watched her dismiss suitors the way one discards bad cards in a game. I know, Marcus said simply, and I love her for it. Even when she embarrasses you publicly, challenges your authority, refuses to follow the conventions you've always valued. Marcus met the Earl's gaze. Especially then, because she makes me question whether those conventions actually matter, whether authority built on fear has any worth, whether an ego that can't withstand challenge deserves protection. He leaned forward. Seraphina has made me a better man, and I intend to spend the rest of my life deserving her. Besides, she's still young, but I know she's had an excellent education. Her irreverence will mature over time, and so will the way she treats others. Silence stretched between them. Then, surprisingly, the Earl smiled. You know what frightens me, Thalbourne. It's not that you can't control her. It's that you won't try. My daughter needs a man who can guide without breaking her, who can set boundaries without building prisons, who loves her enough to say no when necessary. I understand, Marcus nodded, and I promise to do exactly that. Then you have my blessing. And my warning. The Earl stood, extending his hand. Make her happy, but don't let her spin out of control. She needs an anchor, not a cage. Can you be that? Marcus clasped the offered hand. I can. And I will. Raven's Hollow Gardens. After the hunt, Marcus found Seraphina sitting on a stone bench after the hunt, still in her riding clothes, staring pensively at the horizon. May I sit? He asked. She patted the space beside her. Did you get Father's permission? I did. He sat down, taking her hand. But before we move forward, we need to talk. Seraphina frowned. About what? About Ashford. She rolled her eyes. Marcus, if this is jealousy, it's not jealousy, he interrupted firmly. It's about how you treated him. She pulled her hand back, defensive. He deserved it. He showed up assuming, Seraphina. Marcus gently took her chin, forcing her to look at him. Listen, Ashford is young, unfit, completely wrong for you. But he's human, with feelings. You humiliated him publicly. You were cruel, he said without judgment but with absolute firmness. Your intelligence is a powerful weapon, but weapons should be used with precision, not brutality. You can turn down suitors without crushing their dignity. She opened her mouth to argue, but something in his expression stopped her. It wasn't anger. It was disappointment. And that hurt more than any scolding. He irritated me, she said, her voice smaller. I know, but you're better than that. Marcus caressed her cheek. You can be sharp without being destructive, irreverent without losing kindness. And you need to learn the difference. The words hit deep. Seraphina realized with growing discomfort that he was right. Over the past weeks, her pain had turned her wit into venom. I didn't realize, she whispered. I didn't know I was being cruel, he finished gently, because unhealed pain turns into cruelty. But it doesn't have to. Tears stung her eyes. How do you stand me? How can you love me when I'm so difficult? Marcus pulled her into his arms. Because I see who you truly are, and I know this extraordinary woman can grow without losing her essence. He kissed the top of her head. I'll help you with that. I'll guide you when needed, rein you in when you go too far, love you always. But you have to trust me. She pulled back to look at him, vulnerable. Trust how? Trust that when I say enough, it's because I love you too much to let you hurt yourself. Trust that my leadership isn't a prison, it's protection. Trust that I can love you as you are, and love you enough to help you become even better. To become my Marchioness, who drives me mad and fills me with pride in equal measure. She was quiet, processing. Then, surprisingly, she nodded. Teach me, she asked softly. Teach me to be sharp without being cruel, to be irreverent without being destructive. Marcus smiled, pulling her back into his embrace. I'll teach you, and you'll teach me to live, to laugh, to break rules that deserve to be broken. He tilted her chin up. Together, Seraphina, always together. She melted against him, allowing true vulnerability for the first time. I trust you, she whispered. Even when you annoy me, even when you say things I don't want to hear. Good, he kissed her softly. Because I'll annoy you constantly, but always with love. 3 months later, Thalbourne Park Chapel. The chapel was decorated with white roses and blue hydrangeas, filled with London's elite and close family friends. But Marcus barely noticed the guests. His eyes were fixed on Seraphina, walking down the aisle on her father's arm. She wore an ivory silk gown, her hair loose in the waves he adored. And a smile meant only for him, not the social mask, but genuine joy. When she reached the altar, the Earl placed her hand in Marcus's. Take good care of her, he said softly, and let her take care of you. Marcus nodded and the Earl stepped back. The priest began the ceremony, but Marcus barely heard the words. He was too busy watching Seraphina bite her lip to stifle laughter when the priest stumbled over a complicated phrase. How her eyes sparkled when they met his. How she squeezed his hand as if afraid he might vanish. Do you take this woman? The priest continued. I do, Marcus said before the question was finished. Laughter rippled through the chapel. Seraphina blushed but smiled. When it was her turn, she looked at Marcus with an expression that mixed love, challenge, and promise. I do, she said clearly and firmly. I accept irritating you for the rest of my life. I accept messing up your schedules. I accept loving you even when it's impossible. More laughter. The priest looked confused. That's not in the... But it's true, Seraphina interrupted, then looked at Marcus. I do, completely. You may kiss the bride. The priest finally gave up on orthodoxy. Marcus didn't need to be told twice. He pulled Seraphina into a kiss that sealed not only their vows, but a lifelong promise of romantic challenges, mutual growth, and a love that redefined the impossible. When they parted, she whispered only for him, Your turn to put up with me starts now. Ques. I can't wait, my impossible Marchioness. Thalbourne Park, wedding night. Marcus carried Seraphina over the threshold of the master bedroom, a tradition she had mocked but secretly adored. He gently set her down and locked the door behind them. "Finally alone," he murmured, pulling her closer. "Finally mine," she corrected, her hands gliding up his chest. "Ours," he amended, kissing her deeply. "You're mine, and I'm yours." What began tenderly quickly turned urgent. Buttons undone, breaths quickened, years of restraint finally released. Yet amid the passion there was tenderness, care, and mutual respect. When Marcus laid her down on the bed, he paused, taking her in. Her hair spread like a copper halo, eyes dark with desire, a soft smile on her lips. "You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen," he said sincerely. Seraphina pulled him down. "Then stop admiring and love me properly." He laughed against her lips. "Properly? You just banned that word from our vocabulary." "Then love me improperly," she teased, nibbling his lip. "Love me in every impossible way," and he did. With a passion that bordered on worship, with strength that matched hers, with tenderness that melted her defenses. Hours later, tangled in silk sheets, Seraphina traced patterns on his chest, her head resting on his shoulder. "Marcus?" she asked sleepily. Thank you." He looked down, surprised. "For what?" "For loving me enough to guide me, for not letting me lose myself in bitterness, for being strong enough to hold me without breaking me." She lifted her face to kiss him softly. "For teaching me I can be irreverent without being cruel." Marcus held her tighter. "And thank you for teaching me that rules can be broken, that life doesn't have to be perfect to be beautiful, that love is worth any scandal." He kissed her forehead. "You saved me from myself, Seraphina." "We saved each other," she corrected. "Together," he agreed. And there, in the gentle darkness of night, two impossible souls slept entwined, dreaming of a future filled with witty debates, mutual growth, and a love so fierce it would rewrite all the rules. Marcus was in his study, trying to focus on correspondence when Seraphina burst in without knocking. As always, despite his attempts to teach her about privacy. "Marcus," she announced, flopping into the chair opposite his desk. "Guess what?" He looked up, a smile automatically forming. "You finally learned how to knock?" "Funny, no," she leaned forward, eyes sparkling. "Lady Pemberton invited me to organize a charity soiree. Me, impossible Seraphina. And you accepted?" "Obviously. And I'll make it the best soiree London has ever seen. With provocative music, intelligent conversation, and not a single unsuitable suitor reciting bad poetry." Marcus stood, rounded the desk, and pulled her into his arms. "I'm sure it'll be extraordinary." "You always are." She nestled against him, something she did more and more, seeking his touch, his comfort, his strength. Not because she'd lost her own, but because she'd learned that sharing strength made them both stronger. "There's something else," she said, suddenly nervous. "What?" Seraphina took his hand and placed it over her still flat belly. "We're having a little impossible one in 7 months." Marcus froze, processing. Then he smiled, a smile so radiant it rivaled the sun. "A baby?" he whispered, reverent. "A baby," she confirmed. "Our personal impossibility." He lifted her, spinning her until she laughed, then kissed her with all the love in his heart. "It's going to be a girl," he predicted. "Just like you." "Stubborn, impossible, perfect, or a boy," she countered. "Just like you." "Meticulous, organized, secretly romantic." "Or both," he suggested, setting her gently down. "Twins, one of each." "God help us," she laughed. Marcus held her close, his hand still on her belly. "We'll raise them to be free, irreverent but kind, strong but compassionate, impossible but loving. Like us," Seraphina finished. "Like us," he agreed. The sound of a carriage arriving interrupted the moment. Seraphina glanced out the window and smiled. "Tristan. Punctual as always to interrupt private moments." Marcus laughed. He does have a talent for it. Minutes later, Tristan entered the study without knocking, another family member with no concept of privacy, but stopped when he saw Seraphina in Marcus's arms, his hand still resting on her belly. "No," he said slowly, eyes widening. "Don't tell me that. You're going to be an uncle," Seraphina announced, beaming. Tristan let out a joyful yell completely unbecoming of a grown viscount, crossing the room to hug them both. "A baby! My God, I'm going to be an uncle. I'm going to teach them all the wrong things, spoil them rotten, You'll behave." Marcus cut in, though he was smiling. and you'll knock before entering any room in this house." "Never," Tristan shot back, still grinning. "But I promise not to interrupt very private moments. Just the moderately private ones." Seraphina rolled her eyes affectionately. "And you, dear brother, when will you give us a niece or nephew? Or are you too busy avoiding every debutante in London?" Tristan's face shifted, somewhere between embarrassment and something softer. He sat down in the armchair, suddenly fascinated by his hands. "Actually, there's someone." Marcus and Seraphina exchanged surprised looks. "Someone?" Marcus repeated. "The Tristan Ravenshire, terror of London's matrons, admitting interest in someone." "Not just interest," Tristan confessed, blushing slightly. "I'm completely smitten." "Who?" Seraphina demanded, perching on the edge of the desk. "And why don't we know about this?" "Lady Clarissa Winters," he said the name like a prayer. "I met her at the Ashworth ball. She's different, quiet but not shy, observant, subtly intelligent. And when she smiles—" He stopped, realizing he was rambling. "Well, I'm doomed." Marcus burst into genuine laughter. "Welcome to the club, my friend. That feeling of being completely doomed? It's just the beginning. How did you—" Tristan looked at Marcus with something close to desperation. "How did you know that Seraphina was the one? How did you have the courage to risk it?" Marcus looked at Seraphina, and the love in his eyes was so palpable Tristan felt like an intruder. "Because the alternative," Marcus said, "was spending the rest of my life existing instead of living. And once you feel the difference, there's no going back." "And does Lady Clarissa know how you feel?" Seraphina asked gently. Tristan's face turned to panic. "No, of course not. I can barely form coherent sentences around her. Yesterday I greeted her by calling her Lady Clarissa." "Clarissa?" With an R, Seraphina burst out laughing. "Oh, dear brother. You're even more lost than I thought." "You're not helping," Tristan grumbled. "You're absolutely not helping." Marcus stepped closer, resting a hand on his friend's shoulder. "Want some advice? Stop trying to impress her and just be yourself. The honest, imperfect version. The one who cheats at cards and barges into offices without knocking. If she's the right one, she'll love exactly that. And if she doesn't, then she's not the right one," Seraphina finished. "But something tells me Lady Clarissa has better taste than she lets on. After all, you are the brother of the best Ravenshire?" "I thought I was the best Ravenshire," Tristan protested. "You thought wrong," she smiled. "But second place is respectable." Tristan stayed longer, talking about Lady Clarissa in excessive detail. How she tied her hair, how she read books on botany, how her sharp observations were disguised as casual remarks. Marcus and Seraphina exchanged amused looks, recognizing the symptoms all too well. When he finally rose to leave, Tristan hugged them both. "Thank you," he said simply, "for everything. For being an example, for showing me that impossible love is worth the risk." "Always, brother." Seraphina kissed his cheek. "Always." After he left, Marcus pulled Seraphina back into his arms. "Tristan in love. I never thought I'd see the day." "Oh, I did," she smiled. "He's always been a romantic hiding behind cynicism. He just needed the right Lady Clarissa to bring it out. Like you did for me." Marcus kissed her forehead. "Like you did for me," she agreed. And as the sun set over Thalbourne Park, Marquess Evander Thalbourne, the Marquess who had learned to break rules, and Seraphina, Althea Thalbourne, the impossible woman who had learned to love being guided, planned a future where impossible and perfect meant exactly the same thing. And they knew that soon, they'd have a niece or nephew to spoil, courtesy of Tristan and his Lady Clarissa. Because impossible love, they'd discovered, was wonderfully contagious. Sometimes the most impossible love creates the most perfect families, and sometimes two broken souls come together to build something absolutely whole, and sometimes, in doing so, they inspire others to be brave enough to love too. And so ends the story of the impossible Marquess and the lady who tamed him. Or was it the other way around? If you've survived all the sharp banter, stolen kisses, and shattered schedules, do this. Hit that subscribe button and leave a like. Seraphina is counting, and she'll get cheeky if the number isn't satisfactory. In the comments, tell me, are you Team Marcus, overly organized, or Team Seraphina, chaos with purpose? See you in the next impossible love story.